Rachel, and this is Elevated Elephant Podcast, Yoga Talk on the Go. And you'll be listening to part 2 of my interview with Tass Cambitzi on yin, yoga, and yoga philosophy and self-development and all that good stuff. If you missed part 1, you can find it on the iTunes page or on my website. Have a listen and enjoy. Now you brought up the term edge, because that's another thing you hear about, not solely in air quotes yin or air quotes hatha. You hear find your edge or in most of these techniques, but especially I found be with your edge in yin to be quite commonplace. And I just wondered what your thoughts on that are.
Buddhist. So Sarah Powers is another very well-known yin teacher. Who's done both Paul and her, I think, have sort of collaborated a lot on what the yin practice means and on the postures and, what the spiritual aspects of it are. And it's quite a Buddhist, Pema Chodron, who's a Buddhist nun. She's written a lot of books, very, very powerful books and very, very digestible as well in terms of, kind of bringing Buddhism into everyday life without it necessarily being your sort of formal practice. And I think physically going to your edge means, for me at least, when I'm offering that cue, is to go somewhere where you're not protecting against feeling.
And when you say feeling, do you mean, is that open-ended as in physical feeling, mental thought?
I don't differentiate. I'm more and more trying to find the language to suggest, because I'm very interested in quantum physics and the nature of reality and all that kind of stuff. And there are certain people like Bruce Lipton, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle. These are very familiar names, who teach that there's no difference between the way physical matter that's tangible and matter that we can't necessarily see behaves. So therefore, if you are if you're retraining your nervous system to go to a place physically where it's not protecting against a physical sensation, then the likelihood is that you are also retraining your nervous system to go to a place where you're not protecting against emotional sensation. And both these teaching, just to link back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this, where we were talking about the chakra system and the meridian lines and the nadis and the organs that emotions are experienced in, that is a wisdom that isn't necessarily talked about so much anymore, but certainly was prevalent in most societies, even in medieval England. We had sayings about being sanguine or melancholy, which referred to sort of aspects of the body. And if you are willing, or not willing, because that sounds like it's a sort of voluntary, but if we are able to take our nervous system, which ultimately is the connection between mind and body, which is what we're doing in mind-body practicing, we're yoking the two together and bringing them into the same state at the same time. If you are able to have that experience of being somewhere uncomfortable, the likelihood is there'll be change. Now, whether that's change in connective tissue, whether it's change in a muscle, whether it's change in your strength, whether it's change in your flexibility, whether it's change in your behavior, whether it's change in an addictive habit, that's the point of growth. And I think that's why people talk about this edge. And it, maybe for me, it's a very useful, or when I first heard it, was a very useful way of describing a place that I was frightened of, and gave it a reference that made me realize the benefit of having the courage to be there.
And also, I suppose, sorry, carry on.
Maybe for somebody else who has a different relationship to the word edge, it wouldn't be so helpful. I've never thought about it from that perspective, and actually your question brought that thought to my mind, which is sometimes language. I assume everybody has the same understanding of the word edge that I do, because that's the understanding I have, until I meet somebody who says, oh, no, edge to me means edge of a cliff, I'm about to fall off, and it's, kind of, so that, language is very important. And once something gets overused and becomes, then it starts to lose its meaning, because we start to sort of associate it with, oh, I know what that means, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Does that question at all?
No, it's really this is really helpful, because like I said, I've heard that edge described in not only yin classes but other forms of hatha class. And for me, again, depending on the teacher, and I don't expect the teacher to be able to read my mind, and I think we can always try our best with our language, but sometimes we can't say the right thing for everyone all the time. Otherwise, you'd just be paralyzed and you wouldn't dare say anything.
Exactly.
But I just wondered if, especially, it made me think that a lot of these power studios started to have yin, and it was very much like their students could handle these two opposites. Whereas if they'd have classes in the middle, people didn't really understand what that was. Like, is this dynamic? It feels kind of slow, but it's not yin or restorative. So when I heard edge in this sort of power studio context, I just, in my own mind, I just thought, I wonder if these, I'm being very judgmental, but I wonder if these people with this kind of go energy practice and perhaps mentality, maybe, and then put them in a yin class, and they haven't had any spectrum in between. I don't want to downplay or because people are intelligent. When I it was, does the word edge, if you haven't got this Buddhist this kind of, I don't have a very strong kind of Buddhist understanding, but I've read Pema Chodron, which is kind of, very popular. They're very popular books. They're not particularly sort of, academic or whatever it is, but they're meant for the every person. Yeah.
But if you didn't have that, would this word, and you were maybe, a runner or a cyclist of huge long distances, which I have never been. I've never really been somebody who's pushed themselves to the point of physical exhaustion for the sake of, saying I did it, or that's not my cup of tea. And I do wonder, now sort of reflecting on it, if this word edge doesn't suggest take your most painful stretch.
Yes.
Which is not what yin is about. It's edge is definitely about being tentative, about being cautious, about staying on the edge, not pushing
over it. Yeah.
But I totally hear you in the sense that it could be a real language thing.
Yeah, and I suppose, and I don't want to downplay people's own intelligence, like just because people enjoy a power class and maybe they're new to this yoga stuff, that they're not intelligent enough to be able to differentiate. I'm not saying that. It's just...
the problem is when it language is that it's got nothing to do with intelligence. It's all to do with our conditioning of how we have come to understand whatever word is being used.
Yeah.
And we've got emotion linked to language.
Yeah.
So it's not that I'm downplaying anyone's intelligence. It's just simply that somebody might have a different understanding of what that concept means.
But then I suppose it's up to the teacher then over time. So they say this student keeps coming, then over time they start to understand, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not. Usually it doesn't remain fixed. This opinion doesn't remain fixed if you find the right teacher for you. You start to unravel. I mean, that's how I found the yoga. I started, unlike you, mine was physical. So I enjoyed the physical side of it. And then just having that, one-dimensional attitude towards it, slowly over 10 years, I'm now fully immersed and really interested in as much of it as I can get my little hands on. So it's just a personal evolution as well. And I think that's where teachers have I know what you're saying, like, teacher, okay, we're all people and we're all on planet Earth and we're all trying our best. But there is a responsibility to, as best, be a guide to a point and have an open space, like, okay, this is an open space for you to discover what's going on for you and what do you need and what would it be like for me not to tell you specifically what you must do? How would you feel in that freedom? Would you feel constricted or really expansive or somewhere in between? So it just offers people space, doesn't it, to develop in their own time.
I often say yin practice is more challenging for that reason because you're not going to get concrete answers.
That can be really scary for a lot of people. I know, it was kind of like that for me as well. And only now I've started to embrace that sort of, I've got none of the answers, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, that is, as I say, it's a much freer place to be than having the answers because the nature of reality is it changes. So if you've got the answers, you've got to go through the process of letting go of them.
Well, it goes
because
back to,
the answer.
Well, the 5 kleshas, one of them is attachment, isn't it?
Exactly.
And so if we can even take it back to that.
As is one of the pillars of
is it?
Buddhism is non-attachment.
Non-attachment, yeah. So there are complete similarities, and you can look at these texts and these guides just now and again just to check in, like I do. I'll go back to, say, the sutras, and I'll just check in on the yamas and the niyamas and kind of be like, how am I doing with this? Is there any areas that I'm kind of letting go a bit? But be open and okay with that because we, like you said, things change and our priorities change and what we need has to shift to our reality, to our now.
The answers today will not be the answers tomorrow or the answers of next week.
And somehow we've got to be okay with that.
If you become attached to the need to know, you've then got to go through the very painful process of letting that go. And
keep doing that to yourself.
Yeah.
So one of my questions was, so I trained in restorative. I wouldn't say I'm a restorative teacher, but I chose restorative over yin because of my prejudices of being an already flexible person and not understanding the concept of yin. And for whatever reason at that time, I found restorative over yin. And in restorative yoga, there is pretty much, it's all props. So you maybe do, similar to yin, you would do minimal amount of poses. But the main difference is that there's zero effort. The whole point is that you're held like you're floating in space. And I just wondered, do yin practitioners have, like in Ashtanga, there's some really strict Ashtangis where they do not allow props. And I wonder if there's really strict yin practitioners that don't have props, or how do you deal with it? Do you have props in your personal practice? Hey?
I've never met a yin practitioner who doesn't allow props.
There you go.
It's all about the bolsters. No, it's interesting listening to you talk about restorative, because again, in my mind, that's a restorative with a capital R. Like somebody's taught a 50-hour program or a 100-hour program. These are the postures. This is what they do. Capital R, stick it on the schedule. And again, it's relative to whoever we're talking about, because, you know, somebody who's, you know, can kind of barely get themselves out of bed and, you know, can't really focus on anything to read and is, you know, in sort of deep inertia in their life, in depression, does not need to come and sit for 20 minutes draped over a bolster.
No.
You know, that to them is not restorative. You know, for them, doing some really, you know, strong leg postures is and some breath of fire is going to, you know, bring them back to life for a couple of minutes. And that is the restoration, the back to balance. And so for me, teaching yin, I have to be really careful not to fall into that trap of like, well, this is a yin class, therefore I want everybody to leave here feeling feminine, soft, you know, and going through all the sort of
sleepy
yin words that are, it's about bringing balance back. So, you know, if somebody's going into a hamstring stretch, it's going to create some serious warmth and like really be quite challenging, and then the same person next to them is going into the same shape, the same seat, the same asana, but it's a real kind of softening and a monging out. It kind of you know, that it's the same thing, but in different bodies and having different effects. And if the props, you know, assist in either one of those, whether it's bringing the floor up higher to you so that it's a less intense and therefore less yang in relation to the person next to you who's experiencing it in a more intense way, then that's what the props are there to support.
Yeah. Otherwise, it could be distracting. So if someone is in pain, it's not an edge, it's pain. It becomes distracting, doesn't it? So it'd be kind of cruel not to help them out.
Yeah, exactly.
And do you use,
and also,
sorry, Karen.
going back to your point of feeling, you know, that the over flexibility that you were talking about as a dancer and always being able to go into splits, you know, using props can not just be about going deeper. It can be about bringing it back a bit. So, you know, you can put some blankets underneath the knees to create a slight bend if you're somebody that's, you know, whose knees extend more so than somebody else, you know. So it can be about bringing it back as well as deepening it.
I'm loving it. It's really making me think about, you know, my judgments on yin and why I haven't really looked into it. And I wonder if people out there, hopefully if they're listening, are kind of nodding their head like, I've just been nodding my head for this last hour and a half. Like, okay, this is helpful. I understand. This is good. If only I did more practices with you. So it made me think, when I actually did practice with you, I remember there was one tri-yoga class and I really paid attention to the sequencing. And there is an arc. And there was definitely an arc of effort. So it wasn't all, like you said, feminine, soft. Like sometimes I worked with you a lot, actually. We did retreats together. And some of the stuff you can say is very heating. Like it can be quite prickly. Not in a loving way. You know, like you're not afraid to say something that you know might be a little bit... what's the word, to someone, you know, it might prick people's attention, or it might cause people to have a sort of question of like, oh, I didn't like the way she said that, or what does she mean by that, you know. And I like that because it creates a different, it's not all feel soft, feel la-di-da and lovely, like there's some loving kind of, you know, like some tough love. I think it was my really round the houses way of saying. There was some real tough love in there.
I describe the background that I was given, which was I grew because somebody loved me with strength. Not
gorgeous.
Many people loved me with strength. They weren't afraid to sacrifice what I thought of them in order to see me past my struggles.
That's
and that inspired somebody saying to me, difficult things that were difficult to hear.
Yeah.
And actually when we were talking about going to the edge, that was what came to my mind is, as I say, my background wasn't so much in the movement. My background was in the practice of sitting with somebody or a group of people or even peers, like sitting in peer groups, and somebody would bring up, they would say to me, I would tell a story and it would be an exaggeration. I would say there were 10 people there and there were 2. And somebody loved me enough to say, do you know what? That's something I see that you do frequently because you feel like your contribution isn't going to be enough. So you make it 10 people and not 2.
Wow.
And then you sit in the silence and there's the edge. It's that I'm not going to defend against this. I'm not going to pull myself out of this stretch because beyond this stretch is I'm a step closer to my higher self.
Do you know what a word popped in my head is just like this vulnerability, the edge is vulnerable. It's, I don't know what I'm going to do next. I don't, I'm open now. Yeah. What's going to happen?
Yeah. Wow. And I don't know why my life took the turns that it did, and that I was fortunate enough to be in those circumstances so frequently. Many times over the course of many years was I in a formal situation, either held by professionals or by peer groups, where I was constantly taken to my edge, emotionally, spiritually, not physically. It wasn't about hamstring stretches and opening hip flexors and thoracic spine.
You went straight to the good stuff.
Went straight to the good stuff, which then enabled me to understand the yoga practice from a very, very different angle.
Do you have
one that
I'm going off tangent again, Tass, but do you have any thoughts on kind of soul journey, that maybe it was you were putting yourself into those positions by some sort of divine intervention? Do you have any thoughts on that, or not really?
So I've had the honor of going into prisons, working with prisoners. I've had the honor of working in addiction treatment centers. I've had the honor of working with people who've battled eating disorders, which of course, is just another form of addiction, and people who've really, are living a life that, at that point in their life is a punishment. And I can relate to that. I can relate to feeling like life was a punishment. And my soul journey, I don't know if I chose the lessons that have come to me or if I have been chosen for them. I don't know the answer to that, but I do recognize in these people that I relate to, whether it's been in prisons or addiction treatment centers or trauma recovery or whatever it might be, that these things are gifts. They really are gifts. And that's very, very hard to see when you are in that moment. Yeah. When you have punished yourself to the point of starvation, or you've punished yourself to the point of lying in a gutter with your vomit dripping out of your mouth, you've punished yourself to the point where you are incarcerated for behavior, that wasn't, you hadn't thought through the consequences.
Yeah.
And there is, I don't, I mean, it's very difficult to say to those people in that moment, this is a gift and you are being given something beyond what most people are ever given.
Yeah.
But because you have to make sense of it, it is a gift. And I feel incredibly grateful for everything that I've been through, which has been incredibly challenging.
Yeah.
Because I do feel that I have an understanding beyond just my emotional reaction to everything. I still react emotionally. I still get anxious. I still get fearful. I still rage up against my fear. But I can quite quickly see the breakdown of that.
Mm-hmm. It's just,
and I guess that's why Yin has attracted me and been the vehicle that I enjoy, and also get nervous teaching, get nervous delivering, because I recognize that there's something so powerful within these spiritual teachings, including the religions with the big R's, if you take them back to their source, if you take them back to their mystical origins. There's something that brings tears to people's eyes, that turns people's bellies over, that sends shivers down their spine, that raises the hair on their arms, where they suddenly free themselves from a prison of thought.
So we kind of talked about effects on thoughts, emotions, and attitudes. So really, I wanted to know, as well as a teacher of this, do you come up with resistances? So if I'm at the place and I know you and I've looked into this stuff and I can hear stuff that I don't agree with without finding it offensive. If I hear something, so say you said something in a class, it might make me step back for a moment because I've had an initial gut response from previous patterning or previous beliefs. But I can look into that now and sort of try and work out, okay, why did I think that? And why did that make me feel this? And, but do you ever find that there's students that you get resistance from with this, not only with what you're saying, but with how you're teaching or the postures? Do you find you get that?
I think the nature of being in the position of delivering an ancient practice such as yoga or whatever is, if you come up against resistance, you've pushed too hard, because you shouldn't. Resistance is only there because there's resistance has to come from two things. So that would only be because I was pushing my understanding or beliefs onto somebody. There has to be two sides to resistance. You can't resist against nothing.
Yeah, like when you put your two palms together. Yeah, you press.
If there isn't another palm there, it just moves freely through air. So there has to be two sides to a resistance story.
Yeah.
And the very nature of what we've been describing is that there is no fixed belief. There is no fixed answer to the problem. So if somebody's resisting, I've got it's me I've got to look at, because what would happen if somebody wasn't ready to work into these teachings that we're talking about beyond the physical, is that it should not really even land. And as I've become, sounds like I'm beating myself up here, and I don't mean to do that, but as I've become more experienced as a teacher, I have found less resistance because I have been less forceful in what I've been saying. I felt less insecure about what I've been offering. That it's people who don't want to listen to me as a teacher or as a presenter of this tradition will just leave the class, and there's no resistance. They just think, oh, that time doesn't work for me, or I don't like, it comes up as something else. It comes up as, oh, it's not a very convenient evening for me to do a class or whatever. Very rarely do I find an active resistance. And I think that's because early on, when I was feeling insecure about, because there's a big difference to teaching yin for me than teaching vinyasa flow, because I'm often speaking a lot more. I'm talking about, these Buddhist concepts, the concept from the Tao, whatever it might be. And therefore there's the opportunity for more resistance because it touches nerves. But as I've become more secure in my understanding of the teachings, which is that I'm not right, they're not wrong, I can be wrong, things change, all those kind of things, I am less of I offer less to be resistant against, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. And I like the idea of that it just, like you said, people won't even enter the room, possibly, even if and
it comes up as different things, it comes up as something else.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, it's really, really interesting. And I just wondered if you'd ever maybe get more resistance in powerful classes. Because it's like, I remember seeing some people were just so quite aggressive in dynamic classes.
I get quite a bit of resistance. Now that you say that, I do get resistance in, I teach power yoga as well. I mean, I'm not quite sure what that is, but for me it means...
I know.
For me, it's the kind of aspect of strength and
endurance and
that kind of, but quite often I will get resistance in that, in the sense of I know what yoga looks like, let me just get on with it.
Exactly.
I don't any insights. I don't want to learn something new. I want to tick the box that I've done my yoga.
Exactly. So maybe the fact that people are even going to a yin class, they're more open anyway to doing something different.
Yeah. And again, I'm thinking about what my thoughts about resistance, and that's probably because I feel less secure in my movements, that I'm experiencing resistance in power yoga than I am. Than I am in yin, because because the movement is much newer to me than the self-study and the meditation and the mindfulness and the witnessing and the vulnerability and the behavior modification. That's much more familiar to me. I'm offering something to resist against. I'm offering an insecurity that people can resist against. Maybe, I don't know.
I never really thought about it like that. Because any time that I felt resistance, now you've said that, is when I've felt insecure. Yeah. Pretty much 90% of the time. Now you've said that.
Yeah.
Because I can think of a few key classes where I just thought, when is this going to end? Please let this 75-minute class be over now. And it was, because I was like blaming the students, they're not with me, they're against me, and that's all insecurity and ego stuff.
Yeah.
Gosh, you've just unraveled something for me there, Tass. Thanks. Oh, wow. I'm learning so much from this. Thank you.
Oh, well, I'm loving it too.
So have you got any...
I doubt anyone's going to 1 hour, 42 minutes.
Well, I was in my head, I was like, I'll probably do a 2-parter. I'll find like a good place to cut and do, because it's too juicy to stop. And I'm going to make you do this. I'm going to make you do this again anyway, because you said something. I'd like to talk to you as well about... I'd love to talk to you as well about your work in the prisons and stuff. I think that'd be really interesting. If you're willing to talk about that.
Yeah.
On another day. And all your work with that, I think, would be awesome. And also your shamanic work, because I know you do, work around anger and stuff. I'd love to talk about that. But anyway, I'll cut that out because that's not needed right now. So any tips? Have you got any tips for people who wanting to start a yin practice? How would they go about it?
I would definitely suggest going to a class, because there's something very powerful about doing self-study in a group, in a formalized setting where you can't easily entertain your disbelief. So, even for me, who teaches yin, who's studied under Paul Grilly, who has friends who teach yin, who lives her life predominantly in a world of yoga teachers and similar, I can be halfway through a practice and think, what am I doing here? I've got things to do.
Yeah.
I'm not a runner. I don't need this much stretch in my hamstrings. It's all a load of nonsense. What on earth's going on, kind of thing. So, and that when I'm at home, I can easily engage with that thought and think that thought is 100% real.
Yeah.
I'm going to get up from nonsense now, and I'm going to go and do the things that are pressing on my mind, such as answering my emails, sending in that response to a studio which is about income, and income is about supporting my lifestyle, and that is self-sufficiency, and off I go on a whole kind of justification of why the practice that I have set out to do with an intention of a certain amount of time is now cut short. So that definitely starting off and staying with a class, a yin class for a long time, find a teacher that you relate to.
Yeah.
If you find that you're in a class that is simply about lengthening the hamstrings and the fascia surrounding the hamstrings and blah, blah, without, 1 or 2 classes will be very focused on anatomy and very focused on physiology and all that kind of stuff. But make sure that you're getting what you want from the teacher. So do you want to know about the nervous system? Do you want to know about how the nervous system links the mind and the body and the effects in the hormones and all that kind of stuff? Make sure you're getting good bang for your buck.
Yeah.
Your classes are not cheap.
Mm.
And there's a lot to be had from them, particularly, where the teacher's got more chance to talk in that time that you're holding poses. The other tips, I would say, one of the things that Sarah Powers does it beautifully actually is, I always, having come from a background where both my mom and my dad and my stepfather to some extent, there's no element of hippiness in my background. And I use that word for lack of a better word, but, we were certainly not
woo-woo.
Say again?
Woo-woo is another one.
Woo-woo, yeah.
Woo-woo.
But all about the tangible.
Yeah.
There was absolutely, not that it was even kind of thought of disdainfully, it was just never mentioned because it didn't exist. And so every time I step on a yoga mat, whether it's a power practice of vinyasa flow and ashtanga, whether it's at home, whether it's in a class, whether it's whatever, I always set an intention. And what I mean by setting an intention is, even if it's just to challenge myself out of my conditioned sort of childhood thinking of, oh, it's all a load of nonsense, none of this is going to contribute, blah, blah, blah. Whether it's a dedication to somebody else, whether it's an acknowledgement of, a higher power, whether it's an intention to be brave or an intention to be soft or an intention to be strong, just to move it into something beyond ticking boxes.
That's lovely. I think that's really important to set that intention, and it's an atmosphere. It's like I find whenever I do that, it's like an internal atmosphere. I'm stepping out of my everyday. Yeah, and
I've actually even started doing it. I mean, as you know, I about sort of 18 months ago, I started strength training and really in the gym. And before I go and lift, weights, I set an intention and I say, what is this for? What do I want strength for? What do I want to feel empowered in my body for? So that it takes it out of, the mundane, the everyday, the greed for a better body, or
I was just going to say that
because it's so to slip into that thinking.
To slip into those negative. So whether it's I wish to be my body to be a certain way, or I wish to, or if you've got a history of sort of punishing yourself, like just checking in, like, am I using this as a vehicle of punishment or whatever it is, or am I going to use this as a vehicle, like you said, for strength or for vulnerability or softness, all these things.
It's all about framing, really. It's how am I going to
reframe it.
Yeah.
But I think that is beautiful, because it's just everyone can do that. You don't need to spend any money or read any books. It's within your power and your right even to do this for yourself. Like it's what I really love about that.
Yeah.
I think. And also, do you have any tips or advice for people or with an existing yin practice of how, is there a way that they could dive deeper, if that's even the right way to construct that question?
It depends which aspect of it you're interested in. So, for instance, as I said, my friend, who's a totally wonderful yin teacher, but I think quite different from me in the sense that, I'm very interested in the Buddhist and Tao philosophies, and she's really interested in acupuncture and the pressure points and the flow of qi in the body. So she's gone off to do a degree, a master's or a bachelor's, I'm not sure, in acupuncture, which is a kind of 3 or 4 year situation. So, I mean, that's a big commitment, but there are lots of books, there are lots of internet sites that you can look up, meridian lines. I think linking organs to emotions and starting to sort of, feel how that works in your own body. So there's that pathway. For me, I'm very interested in spiritual practices, particularly if they include aspects of movement and mindfulness. So, I'm going down that route of studying Buddhism and Hinduism and study of kind of broad religions. The yin practice is an interesting one because different people give different numbers, and I think it's also been sort of diluted, or maybe not diluted, that's the wrong word, because that brings a connotation a bit weakening, but it's been added on to by sports stretching as well. So, but technically there are only 16 poses in yin.
Okay.
So you could learn them in an hour.
Yeah.
It's not, that's not the sort of deepening of the practice, and that in and of itself, I think, starts to speak to the idea that this is beyond the physical. Because if there's only 16 postures and you can learn them in an hour and anyone can learn them, there's got to be more to this, you know? So I think Sarah Powers, you know, she's a very interesting teacher with a Buddhist perspective on the practice. Paul Grilly and his influences from Dr. Mutayama. If you have the opportunity and are fortunate enough to be able to study under Paul, he's an incredibly well-read, well-practiced man. He's written several books, but I'm sure most people who have a yin practice will have heard of him and will have already seen those.
Do you know what I would say as well, from a non like yin teaching or yin practicing point of view, just in any teaching, like talk to people, talk to your community, talk to your teacher.
Yeah.
Like, I look back at my younger self and I wish I'd have just said hello to the teachers at the end of class. Like I would always just run out because I didn't want to be, you know, annoying or interrupt on their time, or there was always people talking to them, so I better not. And I think talking, just finding out your community and having that dialogue with your teacher, I think would be really useful.
And then I think, you know, from the aspect of svadhyaya, of self-study, and what we were talking about, you know, those kind of formal settings where you are safely taken to your edges and your vulnerability of your sort of humanity. There are things like the path of love or the Hoffman process, or, you know, even one-to-one therapy. You know, that takes that, you know, the idea of that is to take you very safely, very comfortably to your edge. And that's probably the word I should have used earlier when we were talking about edges. It's about being at a comfortable edge. You know, it's about knowing that you're safe. And that you have the possibility to grow. It's a little bit like, you know, children who have a safe base to go back to, who have, you know, they know that their parent is there behind them. They go out and explore. They're happy to go out and check out, you know, things that are a little bit frightening, they're a little bit unfamiliar, because they know they can come back somewhere safe.
Yeah. Got that grounding.
And that's what a yin classroom should provide, and a therapist should provide, and you know, these incredible professionals who are things like the Hoffman process and the path of love provide that safe base for you to start to grow and spread your tentacles a bit further into the reaches of places you didn't know existed.
And I was just thinking about this edge thing is massive. I'm falling down the rabbit hole of edgeness. And I was thinking, most of us learn by going over the edge and hurting ourselves. That seems, you know, as a child, I remember my mum, don't touch that, that's really hot. Don't touch that, it's going to hurt. And then I touch it, and then it really hurts, and I burn myself. And then I learn, okay, that wasn't smart. So I think that there's also in human nature to test that edge from a young age, and we do learn by falling over and getting it wrong, and then it's and the yin maybe puts it in a context. To get
sophisticated about that, the thing that came to mind when you were describing that is, obviously I've just spoken to the fact that I work with people who've been very damaged and therefore result in behavior that is very damaging to themselves and to other people in society. And often what you find in that analogy is that their edge has been blurred by wrong conditioning. So instead of it being your mum saying, don't touch that, it's hot, they've got, you know, a caregiver or an educator who's saying, do touch it, it won't hurt you.
Yeah.
But it's hot. You know, so, you know, in your case, in your scenario, the example that you've given
was
describing
a safe
perfect childhood of, you know, a parent that is, their sole concern is their child's safety. And, you know, we're not dealing with that with most human beings. Most human beings have, you know, issues of some sort. depending on whether the volume is big or small. Yeah. And so often our understanding of edge is warped.
Absolutely. And I suppose it's via the practices of, say, yin, that you learn what your edge is, a healthy, comfortable edge. And that takes time.
And that maybe, lots of people have very over-anxious parents who've taught them that their edge is much further back. It actually is.
Yeah. And they can do more, and they can, push a little bit more, and they won't fall off the cliff because they've got a few feet to go.
Yeah.
And we want to teach this stuff. This is a minefield.
Yeah. Other people's experience is that the edge is way past what is safe. They've had alcoholic parents or rageful parents or, unreliable parents. And we're not just talking about, the down and out of society. We're talking about you and me. Yeah. These are things we may not have even noticed, like a parent, constantly being 10 minutes, 15 minutes late to meet a child at the gate of the school, or and in that 15 minutes there's an opportunity for somebody to be bullied, or it's just being human is just full of these possibilities of changing our perception of things, and then our perception gets fixed in that, and all of this is about self-study, really. And that's coming back to the question of how do I deepen my practice, is study yourself, get to know who you are. What are your habits?
Self-practice. I really, again, I'm going on a tangent, but I really think that people, I know I could have, and now I do, put more emphasis on their self-study. Not just going to class 3 times a week, but actually, if they're really serious about this stuff, actually, making a commitment to self-study. And I think that's when the changes can be made. Obviously, with the help of a teacher is really useful. And I think in the modern age, our teachers, we have so much information now. So I could go online, I could find a podcast that maybe will speak to me and it'll help me, or I might find an online tutorial or a YouTube video, and there is information out there that can really progress a practice if the teacher isn't available for you as well.
Yeah.
So
they're the 3 components, of the practice of yoga is tapas, svadhyaya, ishvara, pranidhana. Mm-hmm. And that's that, when you read anything that boils down the yoga practice, those are the 3 elements that result in a fundamental change.
Can you translate them as well, just in case people don't?
Yeah. Tapas is austerity, so that's, the discipline and the courage. Svadhyaya is self-study, which can be understood as self-practice, as in, doing your own practice and reading your own scriptures and blah, blah, blah. But also to study the self, to study the makeup of self. And Ishvara Pranidhana is to let go of the outcome of what those 2 things provide. So, ultimately to dedicate it to something greater than yourself. And I'm reluctant to go down the divine or God.
Yeah, I wondered, yeah.
Yeah, because I think that turns people off, to what if I don't believe in an outer being? Ishvara Pranidhana, the divine, meaning simply that higher self within you. When you close your eyes and someone says, step into your higher self, and you see yourself in your magnificence. Yeah. But without defining what that magnificence should be.
I really liked how you put it, you've done all this efforting, and you've done the practice, you're doing the practice, but then the final thing is to just give it all up, just be not attached to an outcome. And that's probably the hardest thing for a lot of people. It's very humbling that you might be back at square one, or you might be back at square one, but you have a greater understanding of what got you there in the first place, and so you can make a different change in your life. And I really like how you put that, of just offering it all up to the unknown, of the unknowable, of the you don't know, no one. Yeah. And we're doing our best, I think. And it's fab that there's practices. And what I like about yin is that, as well, it sounds that because it is becoming more in the mainstream. Again, I'm doing those little bunny ear quotes. So hopefully it could be another bridge gap for people, starting perhaps power classes because they want X, Y, and Z in their body and their performance, and they just want to feel a little bit calmer. And then they start to stay in shavasana. They don't have to get the train. They're okay. And then slowly they go, okay, what is this yin stuff? What is this meditation stuff? And then slowly it begins to unwrap for them in their own unique way. It's just fab that we have these, we live in a world now where we have these choices. It is out there for us. The information is there for us, which I think is a new thing. I think relatively new thing. In the 1980s, there probably wasn't a yoga studio in most streets, but now it's everywhere. So where that can have, not so great shadow side of that, there's also a really good uplifting side of that as well. So Tass, just before you're going to say something.
You just reminded me of the most important thing. I can't believe why we haven't discussed it, is this idea of shadow. Being shadows. So
this is why we need more chats.
Yeah.
If you're up for it.
Yeah.
Because I knew you can't understand yin in one episode. Like, it probably needs the whole 100.
Yeah. Definitely.
So I'm gonna put a little button in that, because I think there's so much sort of like wisdom and knowledge that you have, and I want to dedicate it to other chats, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, definitely.
So I know I just found out what you're up to, but what are you up to now, Tass?
I am, as we speak, about to go into my second week of a bachelor's degree in the study of religions.
Blimey. your brain is not going to fit inside your head anymore, I don't think. Yeah. Well, often I get asked the question, what on earth that got to do with yoga? And everything.
Everything. I mean, yoga's not a religion. It's the closest thing I think yoga is, if we need to box it, is a science.
Yeah.
But as I said, I think I said earlier in the podcast, actually ligament comes from the word ligio. It means to connect, which obviously physically in the body we're connecting different aspects with ligaments and tendons and fascia and connective tissue. Meaning, as the sort of repeating at the beginning of the word. So it's reconnect. And I'm just fascinated in the practices that people across the ages have used in order to connect to spirit that feels disconnected, because shame disconnects us. Shame makes us separate ourselves from our peers, from the room that we're in. We start thinking those thoughts of, what are they thinking about me? Why are they prettier than me? I wonder what experiences they've been through. And in that room, you're alone. And, that's what religion has always been, is a way to reconnect. And that's what I'm fascinated in, is how do you get the most disconnected people from a community reconnected so that they feel that damaging behavior to themselves or others is a risk to being part of that community. Because we only hurt ourselves or hurt other people or commit criminal acts when we've developed a defensive thinking pattern. That is, it doesn't matter if I hurt myself or hurt others, whether you're conscious of it or not. That's what you're doing.
And that loss of connectivity, that if my actions don't cause an effect, and
exactly.
I think times when I've been really, harmful is when I've lost that connection of myself to people around me.
The greater whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when pain.
And that greater whole doesn't, we don't have to talk in massive spiritual concepts here. The greater whole might be your family. The greater whole might be your peer group. The greater whole might be, the village that you live in or the city that you live in. And you're willing to risk your connection to that greater whole for a momentary relief of pain, because you think that your actions are inconsequential. You think that you are inconsequential. And I cannot remember who said it, but I saw it recently as a kind of social media sort of little snippet, but it was a sort of old saying of loneliness is not being without people. It's thinking that the people you're with, you don't matter to them. So you can be surrounded by people. I mean, London is a great example to be surrounded by so many people. I'm sitting in an Airbnb flat here, and there's probably somebody sleeping above me, 5 meters above me. But I mean, do I feel like I matter to them? Do I have a sense of community with the people I'm surrounded by? And that can extend. That's pretty obvious in a block of flats. But in families, if people are coming from families where there's been abuse or drug abuse and again, I'm talking on these big scales, but it doesn't have to be massive. It can be a mother who's too focused on her career. It can be,
and these are just people doing their best with the information they had at the time. I just said, when on this kind of more normalized, these normalized mistakes are not terrible mistakes. It's just people doing the best they can with the information that they have. Yeah,
exactly. And if people start to feel that they don't matter, then their behavior will start to reflect that they think they don't matter.
And it all starts from the self, always, doesn't it? Start hurting yourself, start hurting others. Maybe,
Well, again, we go back to the bigger teachings and this idea that we're all made of the same matter, and if we're all made of the same matter, then what separates us? Only the idea of self. So if I'm hurting myself, I'm hurting you, and if you're hurting yourself, you're hurting me, because what's actually separating our physical matter is only the sense of self.
And I love that, and on like a quite an easy scale to feel this. If I've ever done a shavasana or a seated meditation, just simply closing your eyes and your boundaries sort of dissolve a little bit, your physical, because you've taken away sense of sight, maybe a little bit sense of touch because your body's not moving in space. I think that gives you a glimpse into, gosh, if I take away my senses, what's left?
And that's a lovely parallel from the yin practice, because we're working with the fascia of the body, and the fascia is completely interconnected in the body. There's no, it's not in groups of like the quadricep group and the hamstring group and the
it's global, isn't it? It's everywhere.
The whole thing is continuous within the body. So if you're tight in your right big toe, it's very likely that you will experience pain in your left shoulder. It could be as likely as experiencing it in your right, in the right side of your lower back, because the fascia in the toe, it being tight down there, because it's continuous throughout the body, it also affects somewhere else. And that's the same, if we think of ourselves, we only have to take Christian language, where we are one body.
Yeah.
We are all moving parts of one body. And so if there's pain in one area of society, there will be pain in another area of society.
I love that. That there's parallels everywhere when you start looking.
Yeah.
The macro and the micro, really.
Yeah. Einstein said, if you understand the human body, you understand the universe. If you understand the smallest cell, you understand the universe.
Yeah.
The same. There are very, it's a bit like the yin practice. There are only 16 poses. There are only very few principles that govern particles. We are particles.
How long is your course, Tass?
3 years.
Okay. I'm going to keep me updated on all your learning. So, and also, just before, I will sign off soon. But are you teaching your yin anywhere for people if they're in London or if Oxford? I think you said you're teaching.
Yeah,
mainly?
so I teach in Oxford, and I'm at the moment teaching when I can in London. So that includes kind of workshops and covering for other fellow yin teachers when they take a break. My schedule's such at the moment that it's difficult for me to kind of commit to classes in London.
Yeah, because your focus is on study now, isn't it?
Yeah. So I have my base in Oxfordshire, and I teach there all weekend. A mixture of power yoga in bunny quotes, yin yoga in bunny quotes. And I actually now teach something called animal yoga, which
I saw some of this on your Instagram. It looks brilliant.
Yeah, it's fun.
It looks so good. See, there's so many topics I want to talk to you about. Shadow work, the animal yoga, more yin. Oh gosh. Yeah. And what's you have a beautiful website. I mean, I'll write all this down on the show notes page on my website, but just now, what is your website that people can find all your stuff?
www.alignedwith.com.
Alignedwith.com. And that's where you have your Facebook link and Twitter and Instagram and all that, so they can find all your social media whatnots.
Yeah.
And all that fun stuff. All right then. Any final words you want to say? Any final bits of wisdom on the topic of what we've been discussing?
I suppose just to say that, in this idea of finding balance between yin and yang, strong and flexible, light and dark, that it means embracing the dark as much as we do the light. It means embracing the slow as much as we do the fast. Embracing that for me is the core of the teaching, is that embracing failure as much as achievements. Yeesh.
Yeah.
That's the hard.
Boo.
Yeah, but only because we have a judgment about it.
Exactly. Do you know how I've started to look at darkness now?
With somebody who really valued failure, we'd have a different judgment. So
applauded you and said, okay, what have you learned? Okay, you fell on your ass. Awesome. What did you learn about that? Yeah, you don't really have people like that in your life, do you?
No.
From a young age, not really.
Yeah.
And also how I've started to reframe darkness.
Yeah.
Is, like womb, a womb place, a nurturing, sometimes darkness is very comforting. It doesn't have to be a scary void. Yeah. It can be, it absolutely can be, and it is, but it is also a place of growth and a place of rootedness and understanding all that mucky stuff.
Yeah.
So that things can grow and flourish. Thank you so much for this.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for chatting. It's chatting a Monday night away.
Oh my gosh, what time is it? It's like 11:15.
About 4 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh, and you've got to get up and be clever. Thank you. I'm beyond thankful that you stayed up for this. I'm really, 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 really excited for people to hear it.
I wish I could steal you back from the other side of the world.
I know. Or you can come here one day after 3 years. Or I might be back before then, who knows. Thank you so much for listening to part 1 and 2 of my interview with Tass Cambitzi. If you're interested in finding more about her, you can go to allthewsalignedwith.com, and for more information and show notes you can go to my website, which is allthewsrachelperry.co.nz. I highly recommend you checking out this wonderful woman. Until next time, happy practicing. Happy teaching.